Hi there, I'm Vincent Boss and I provide dating and self-improvement advice. And in today's podcast, we're going to be discussing dumper feelings on Valentine's Day. I provide audio coaching to help people try and get their ex back or get a new girlfriend or boyfriend. Check out my website for more details. www.dateme.tips. Please check your spam and junk folders if you are expecting an email from me. So now let's get back into today's podcast. And today we are discussing dumper feelings on Valentine's Day. So if you have been dumped and want to try to get your ex back, Valentine's Day can feel challenging. But what is your dumper feeling on Valentine's Day? In today's podcast, I discuss 3 potential feelings that your dumper may experience. So let's get straight into this, and point number 1 is disappointment. So although you probably fear that your ex-dumper is having a most fantastic time on Valentine's Day, one of the most likely feelings that your dumper will be feeling on this day is actually disappointment. And that is based on the fact that they may have had grand ideas about what single life may have presented to them, and unfortunately, the reality doesn't always live up to the fantasy. When somebody ends a relationship, they have high hopes of living their life in a way where they feel more fulfilled than when they were in the relationship that they decided to end. This may have included the thought that they would find somebody even better to connect with during this time apart. They may have felt, look, I'm going to have high hopes of meeting someone new, or maybe, even if it's not connected with going on new dates, there may have been a thought of going to a Valentine's Day event, maybe attending something where they felt they could be free and single. But the likelihood is that these elements won't fall into place within this time frame. From my research, it takes a very long time indeed to find a long-term compatible partner. Most people who are single are looking for more than a year, often 2-3 years, for somebody who is long-term compatible. So the likelihood of your ex-dumper, who I'm going to assume if you're listening to this podcast, has probably ended a relationship within the last year. There may be some of you who are listening who's been more than a year, but I would say most of you listening is probably going to be within that first 12 months. Are they really likely to have found somebody compatible? It's very, very unlikely. Now, even if your ex-dumper has been on a few dates, this is more than likely just going to fizzle out. So there is the feeling of disappointment of when Valentine's Day comes around, because they thought they would feel great, but actually they're more likely to be alone and feeling lonely. So what does this mean if you're a dumpee and you want to try to get your ex back? Well, what it means in essence is you don't want to get too hung up about Valentine's Day. It is just another day on the calendar. It is a day which will come and which will go. The sun will rise, the sun will set. And if you are feeling extra anxiety about Valentine's Day, just remind yourself that it is just another day. It doesn't mean that there's going to be an increased chance of your ex-dumper meeting the love of their life. This is not the case. You as a dumpee need to live your life to the full. You need to be focusing on you and not what your ex-dumper is doing in their life. Because unfortunately, our mind doesn't help us out. You as a dumpee will have your mind almost playing tricks on you, telling you the worst case scenario time and time again. The reality is often a lot more boring, a lot more mundane. If you are really struggling though and you would like support, not just over Valentine's Day, but whenever you feel you need to speak to somebody, whether you want to go through breakup recovery, whether you want to try and increase the chance of one day getting your ex back, then you may want to consider my audio coaching service, where me and you can speak one-on-one about your unique situation. If you would like to talk with me, if you would like me to be your coach and your teammate, go to my website www.dateme.tips for more details on my audio coaching service. So now let's get into point number 2 and the second point of today's podcast about dumper feelings on Valentine's Day. And point number 2 is missing their dumpee. So if you're a dumpee and you want to try to get your ex back, this is the news that you want to hear. You can't get your ex back unless they miss you. At the time of a breakup, unfortunately, your now ex the dumper's romantic emotional attraction would have plummeted to a low point where they ended the relationship. Your only opportunity of getting them back is for that attraction level to have risen and your ex the dumper to miss you. So what does this mean regarding Valentine's Day? Well, one of the likely possibilities of dumper feelings on Valentine's Day is that they miss their dumpee. And this is based on triggers of past Valentine's Days. Now, if you're thinking that there's a chance your ex-dumper may be missing you, you might be wondering, well, shall I reach out to them? I would say no. Okay, there is no definitive advice to get an ex back. Nothing works 100% of the time. Nothing fails 100% of the time. But I aim to give you the best possible chance of success. And statistically speaking, based on my research, your chances of success increase as a dumpee. For most instances, there are caveats for some people, which is why my audio coaching can be helpful to try to figure out exactly where you're at. But a generalized approach is to say that if you have been dumped, you should never contact your ex again unless they contact you first. So if you're thinking, well, my ex might be missing me, shall I reach out to them? No. They need to miss you enough to reach out to you. Okay, that's the generalized advice for most people. So what did I mean by this is based on triggers? What did I mean by Valentine's Day creates a chance where your ex-dumper may miss you as the dumpee? Well, this is the fact that Valentine's Day, along with other significant days of the year, is the type of day that when you wake up on it, when you realize what day it is, you naturally think back to prior Valentine's Days. When you realize it's Valentine's Day, you naturally think, oh, what was I doing last Valentine's Day? And if you were with your ex on last Valentine's Day, they're naturally going to think of you. They can't not think of you. You were part of their life story. They were part of yours. So when they think to last Valentine's Day, if you were with them, or maybe you were with them for many Valentine's Days, that is going to act as a trigger. And they're going to be thinking about you. They're going to be thinking about your past relationship. And quite likely, they're going to be thinking of better times. They're not going to be thinking of the moment that the relationship ended. They're going to be thinking of times when you were really good together, when you were feeling love between one another, where there was a high level of romantic emotional attraction in their mind towards you. So this will help your cause as a dumpee. This trigger will pull on the memory, pull on the heartstrings of the dumper, and increase the chance of romantic emotional attraction growing. So in this instance, we see a situation with them missing you via a trigger, creating the romantic emotional attraction. Whereas sometimes romantic emotional attraction is grown in other ways, and that then develops into a dumper missing a dumpee. So it can work both ways. But ultimately, the attraction level needs to be high enough before they will reach out to you. So if they don't reach out to you on Valentine's Day, it doesn't mean that they're not going to reach out ever again. Now, of course, I can't guarantee that they will. And sadly, some dumpees will never hear from their ex again, which is why as a dumpee, you've got to live your life to the full. You've got to move forward. You can't clock watch. There are no guarantees. But if your ex-dumper doesn't reach out to you, it doesn't mean they're not thinking about you. It doesn't mean that the attraction level has grown a little bit. It just possibly means it hasn't reached the necessary high point. But there could be some attraction put into the can, you could say, where the next time they feel a trigger or some type of development in their mind, they will be building upon a higher attraction level. Imagine a fuel can, imagine a gas can, a petrol can. Imagine it is empty. You're putting some liquid into the can, okay? You're putting some fuel into the can. You're putting some attraction into the canister. And that means the next time attraction's added to it, it's not at the base level anymore. It's a little bit higher. Think of it that way. That analogy will give you the example This could be attraction put into a can where further attraction down the line in the weeks and months add to it and could result in your ex-dumper reaching out to you in a few months, for instance. And what you wouldn't have realised is that this possibly began on Valentine's Day. So you as a dumpee, although it can't be guaranteed, need to be informed for great news that one of the likely possible feelings a dumper will have on Valentine's Day is actually missing you. It might not mean they reach out right now, but it could be the beginning of when they eventually do. So now let's get into point number 3 and the final point of today's podcast about dumper feelings on Valentine's Day. And point number 3 is hyperactive. So this might sound an unusual statement to make, but it is important to say that one of the possible dumper feelings on Valentine's Day is hyperactivity. And this is based on the forced feeling of excitement. So what do I mean by this? Well, like I said earlier, when a dumper ends a relationship, this is because they feel unfulfilled within the connection at that time, and therefore they have high hopes of moving into single life where they hope they are going to be more fulfilled. But like I said in point number 1, there can be disappointment. But what happens before that actually consists of? What happens before the disappointment can fall? Well, originally, there is the hyperactivity, there is the hope, the desire that something exciting, wonderful is going to happen. So what you'll find is some dumpers really try to force an excited feeling by going over the top with plans. Maybe they're contacting all of their single friends and saying, hey, look, we want to be going out here. We want to go to this event. Let's do a thing. Let's do this. Let's do that. Wherever it may be, you sometimes see dumpers really hyperactive, really acting as if they've never been single before in their life, and they're trying to do everything that they can within a short period of time. And Valentine's Day may give that possibility of where they might see events, they might want to go to a club or some type of party. And although as a dumpee you probably don't want to hear this, like I said in point number 1, this often ends in disappointment. But before that possibility occurs, there is the hyperactivity, the excitement, the buzz of really trying to do this, do that, do the other. Because as a newly single person, or even if it has been a number of months or even years, sometimes dumpers are still jumping onto this situation as if this is brand new to them, they've never been single before, and they want to try this, that, and the other. Especially if it's within the first 6 months of a breakup, or sometimes 6 to 12 months extended, a dumper will be in what I like to call the single honeymoon period. And during this time, they are living their life to the full. They're living it to the max. The excitement for hyperactivity can certainly be seen within this period. So if you hear from friends of friends, if you see on social media your ex-dumper going to events, seeming like they're living their life at 1,000,000 miles an hour, try not to get too disheartened. This is very natural. This is a possibility. And it doesn't mean that your ex-dumper is going to meet somebody new right now. Now, of course, nothing can be guaranteed. We don't know what the future holds for you or your dumpee, but statistically speaking, like I said earlier, it's very unlikely they will find somebody new within the first year or possibly even 18 months to 2 years. So, if you see your ex is living their life in an excitable way, instead of being worried about it, you need to match it. You need to live your life to the max. We only live once. Don't take any day for granted. Remember, your feelings right now are temporary. You are in a dark, bleak tunnel, but if you keep moving forward, you will get out the other side and into the excitement and happiness that you deserve. You can and will feel happiness again. So don't get hung up if your ex is living their life to the full. Just make sure you are also living yours. You can and will get through this. If you believe that this podcast has helped you, then please consider buying me a coffee. The link to do so is in the description.